This is Bailey Street, North Fremantle, in the early 1960s. Close to Port Beach and the docks, the street consisted of about 30 workers' cottages. But by the end of the decade, they would all be gone. Except for one. This was Carmel Mullally's house. She was known as, quote, the lady who lives in the port. To this day, it remains the only remnant of Bailey Street. North Fremantle has changed a lot since this street was full of housing. Established in 1851, it's situated on a peninsula, crammed between ocean and river. Its current industrious nature grew in the 50s and 60s with the construction of the Leighton marshalling yards and the further development of Fremantle Harbour. This led to the demise of Bailey Street as the houses were gradually rezoned and resumed. But what's the story of number 28? Let's find out how the cottage has persisted and delve into the story of Carmel Mullally. Opposite Port Beach, Bailey Street was subdivided in 1898. It was full of weatherboard cottages typical of the period. This particular house, built somewhere between subdivision and 1913, is in the Federation Queen Anne style. The small residential area was intended for local workers, like Carmel's grandfather. Him and his wife would go on to have 11 children, which must have been tight in the modest 3-bedroom cottage. As the decades went on, various other members would occupy the house. Carmel was born in Collie in 1932, the eldest of 7 siblings. She and her family eventually moved to York and later Bassendean. Her first visit to the house was in the 1940s. It was still occupied by her grandfather at the time, but she stayed there because her mother was having a baby. Fast forwarding to the end of the 50s, and she would buy the house off her father when she got married. I would imagine life on Bailey Street was quite standard in the following years, but the 60s were a time of change for North Freo. In November 1963, the area was rezoned for port use under the Metropolitan Region Planning Scheme. One by one, the houses along the street were purchased by the Fremantle ports and demolished in anticipation for expansion. They originally offered Carmel $5,800 in 1967, but she refused. They later bumped the offer up to $10,000, but she continued to say no. The money just wasn't enough to buy a similar house in the same area. Eventually, number 28 was the final house on the road. It would stay this way until somewhere between 1985 and 1989, when Bailey Street was cut off from public roads on the south side. It now ran directly into the port, although it does look like an alternative slip road was created around these factories. By the 1990s, Carmel was a retired office worker. It was lucky she had more time on her hands, as the Port Authority stepped up their pressure by issuing a resumption notice in February 1990. They wanted to build a rail loop, with number 28 right in its path. By this time, the port was offering $105,000 for the cottage. If online inflation calculators are to be trusted, that's around $253,000 in today's money. Carmel still didn't want to sell, however. She even painted "Help Save Me from the Port Authority" on the side of her house. This of course garnered her community support. She was quoted as telling Fremantle Focus in 1990 that "the whole affair has been like a Shakespeare play. The actors come and go, but the speeches stay the same." Carmel would go on to hire a solicitor. They would lodge an objection with the Department of Land Administration, which resulted in a lot of media attention. The following year, Kerry Sanderson became the Chief Executive Officer for the Fremantle Ports. She didn't seem to have an issue with Carmel or the location of her house, and from there, the ports eased off their pressure. By all accounts, Carmel had a much better relationship with the ports from that point onwards. Sanderson would eventually go on to become the Governor of Western Australia, and the railway would still be built in the mid-2000s despite her house. It was just routed past her back fence instead. In her later years, Carmel was quite active in her community. For example, she campaigned against local grain silos from being demolished, but despite the Heritage Council recommending the complex be put on the register, it was demolished in 2000. On the other hand, her own cottage was added to the Heritage Register in 2007. This ensured that it wouldn't ever be demolished. By then, the house was situated between a train line, a storage yard, and Tideman Road, a busy freight route. By all accounts, she wasn't bothered by any of the noise. She was finally enjoying her retirement peacefully in her own home. When the ABC asked about her history with the ports in 2019, she stated, "I didn't really do anything, just refused to sell." In 2021, she moved to Regis Aged Care in Greenmount. The same year, the family contacted the ports about finally selling the home. I saw some Facebook comments claiming this was to pay for the aged care, but that's not a verified fact. Ultimately, Fremantle Ports purchased number 28 for $450,000. Is that a fair price? Houses on nearby Pier Street regularly sell for about $1.5 million, but to be fair, they're not in the middle of a port storage yard. Carmel passed away on the 11th of February, 2022. She was 89 years old. So, what is the fate of the house? Thankfully, because of its heritage listing, Fremantle Ports have assured that it won't be demolished. The cottage may eventually be moved from its current location, however. They claim they will consult the community before any decisions are made. In 2022, Fremantle Ports applied to the city to have Bailey Street closed, with the land amalgamated into their existing property. Since they own the cottage anyway, the road would no longer be required for access or street addressing. As of recording, the road is still open. There doesn't appear to have been any changes to the cottage either, although the garden is due for a prune. I'm sure Carmel wouldn't be impressed with that. Since the 1960s, over 300 homes have been demolished in North Fremantle. Nearly half of its shops have disappeared over the decades as well, reducing the size of its town centre. North Fremantle even ceased being an independent municipality. It was instead absorbed into the city of Fremantle. Allegedly, there were no impact studies on the community before the port expanded. Having said that, houses are finally returning to the peninsula. Apartment blocks sprung up on Leighton Beach starting about 2008. That land was originally the marshalling yards mentioned earlier. Closer to Bailey Street, on the other side of Tideman Road, there will be the North Fremantle Urban Precinct. This land had a number of past uses, like a fuel terminal, but was raised for future housing in 2017. You can even see the future subdivided lots on Landgate. In fact, the entire peninsula might stop being industrial land altogether. The long-term plan is to move the whole port to Kwinana, with the North Fremantle Peninsula eventually becoming the new home for 55,000 residents. Bailey Street would have been completely lost to history if it wasn't for Carmel Mullally. It's a small but surviving piece of port beach from a long-gone era of workers living next to their industrial workplaces. Hopefully, they leave it in situ. I can't see why future housing couldn't be built around it. And no, the streetlight does not turn on at night. If you would like to support my channel, I offer a YouTube membership program that includes bonus videos. The most recent video is about a car camping build I did for my Subaru Forester. I spend quite a lot of money on rural accommodation for these videos, which can sometimes leave a lot to be desired. The idea is to instead camp, but utilise the creature comforts an SUV can provide. Throughout the video I build the setup, test it, and even head out on a few mini adventures. They weren't really the sort of locations or stories that would be suitable for a full video, but are perfect to include in a camping vlog. I'm planning on making more of these in the future. There's also a 2-part series on how I made the Clays Brook video, and even a travel guide I filmed while on holiday in Melbourne. There, I visited some locations that I think this audience would find interesting. Lastly, there are 2 separate vlogs of filming trips. Many of the videos I've released over the last 12 months were filmed on these trips. The first was around the Kalgoorlie region, while the second included Kew, Geraldton and Kalbarri. The support program is just $3 a month and can be cancelled at any time. That $3 includes the extra content, shows your username at the end of the videos, and highlights any comments you might make. All money earned goes back into the production of future videos. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.